Hi everyone, I hope you were all well. It's late afternoon, Sunday afternoon, should I say, here in the UK. It's been an absolutely glorious day today. Well, it has been glorious all weekend, but especially today, it's just been wonderful. And I've been spending Sunday as usual with my mum and dad, who I'm in a social bubble with. So it was really lovely spending the day with them today. So this week it's been busy as usual, but also I got my brand new Hoover, which is absolutely amazing. I can't believe I'm getting excited over a Hoover, but then I am an adult, I'm in my mid-30s, so you know. I got a new D, which I absolutely love, and I also bought a load of tops from the Globe Theatre, including I'm wearing one of them. See very well, but it's a skull. It's a Hamlet t-shirt of a skull, which of course is Yorick, and it has the "to be or not to be" quote on the front. I absolutely love the shirts from Go Theatre, and I wanted to buy myself some new clothes, and I absolutely love all of their clothes range that they have, and I bought a bunch of tops from different Shakespeare plays, and I just fell in love with them. I bought 5 of them, and they arrived a couple of days ago. So yeah, I just thought, and also they're great, and also it's actually providing money for the Globe Theatre and everything, which I at this time, helping to support a theatre, I feel really good, rather than just buying a cheap t-shirt from anywhere. I'd rather spend a little bit more money to give some money to theatre, which I love, than just buying a cheap t-shirt, really. And yesterday, what else did I? Yesterday, yeah, I did a complete spring clean of my house. So because I got my brand new Hoover, I realised when I was sort of, playing around with it, I was, testing it out. I was like, oh my god, my house is a lot more filthy than I thought it was, because of my slowly dying Hoover that I had was just not doing the job. And I was like, oh good god, my house is filthy. So I did a full spring clean of my house yesterday. So I've been very, very busy, pretty much constantly throughout this week. If it's not work, then I've been cleaning and all sorts. Or I have been reading, which is what I'm here to do today. I am here to review The Scrolls Bridle by Minette Walters. So in case you didn't see my review last year, because it was right near the end of last year, I did review one of Minette's more recent books. It was a historical fiction book called The Last Hours, but that was good. I enjoyed it, but I didn't know until after I started reading it that it was actually the first of a two-parter. So I was a bit like, oh, okay. So I didn't have the full, in a way, singular book narrative structure. I had a continuing one, which I had no problem with, but at the same time, I was just a bit like, well, because there's obviously unresolved issues and such, I wanted to see what Minette Walters' writing was like for a single book narrative. And my mum and my sister really like Minette Walters' books, have done for years, and The Scrolls Bridle is one I distinctly remember them reading, more specifically my sister reading, because she read it after my mum recommended it to her. And I can distinctly remember my sister reading it, and she told me about the crime scene that happens in this book, because it's a crime novel. And the image of that crime scene is the first thing that comes to mind when I think of The Scold's Bridle. It still does after I finish reading it. But yeah, I hadn't read it until now. So, as I said, this is a crime novel. This is a more modern setting, of course. This was published in the mid-90s and is based in the mid-90s, but it's not that thing where it's very, very clear that it's the mid-90s, like certain popular culture references or anything like that. So you could read it and think that it is a modern day, apart from obviously using less sophisticated methods of investigation than what they have now for the police. And it's all about a woman called Matilda Gillespie. Pronounce your words right, Becky. So Matilda is found at the very beginning of the book with she is our victim. She's found in a bath, naked in a bath, with her her wrist slit, pumped full of barbiturates, wearing a Scold's Bridle and a headdress set made of weeds, daisies, and nettles, which obviously is very, very startling. And her doctor, Sarah Blakeney, is asked by the police to come confirm that it is Matilda and explain the drugs that she had prescribed for her, etc. Obviously, death certificate, all of that stuff. And they pretty much straight away, the police go, well, we think this is a suicide. And Sarah goes, no. She wasn't a woman who would have done that. This isn't right. And the fact that she was found wearing the Scold's Bridle and the flowers and weeds around her head didn't really make sense, because she didn't have any signs like on her hands, scratches or anything from the weeds or the nettles. She had no nettle stings on her hands. So how was she able to put those on her head before killing herself if she's got no evidence of it, and there's no gloves or anything around that could explain why she didn't have them, that kind of thing. There's some very, very odd things going on with this scene, and it mainly follows Sarah figuring out exactly what happened, along with a police detective called Cooper. And yeah, all sorts of things they learn along the way. And Matilda is really quite a complex woman. She was known as the bitch of the village, basically. She said her mind. She didn't care what people thought of her. She's very, well, she was, because obviously she's dead in the very first scene. She's very, very honest about anything. And she has a very interesting past, which gets learned along the way. And yeah, she has a very, very complex relationship with her daughter and granddaughter, who get caught up in everything as well. So that's basically the premise of the story. But the Scrolls Bridle, in case you're not aware of what this is a medieval torture device, basically. A woman could be forced to wear a Scold's Bridle for any reason. Usually it was for nagging, and it's basically a metal cage that wraps around their head and clamps at the back. And at the mouth is a sharp bit of metal which forces their tongue down. So you cannot talk. And you'd be dragged and paraded around, and people are allowed to beat you and stuff like this as punishment for whatever you did. So thus the Scold's Bridle, the weeds and stuff in her hair, the slitting her wrists when she's full of barbiturates, and Sarah knowing that there's no way in hell she would have killed herself, leaves a very interesting, very intriguing story to figure out what exactly happened to her. And there's only, well, I was going to say one, but there's actually only two people in the world who Matilda has ever respected. The first is Sarah Blakeney, her doctor, who I've already talked about, and the other is William Shakespeare. Thus, I'm like, hey, I needed to wear a Shakespeare top, and I just so happened to get some Globe Theatre t-shirts come through the post this week, so like, why not? And she was a great admirer of Shakespeare. Shakespeare weighs rather heavily in this book, constantly referred to, constantly quoted. Her favourite was Hamlet. So I was like, I have to wear a Hamlet top to do this review. But yeah, she was an extremely complex character, and I found her very, very intriguing. So, as I said, I had read one book of Minette Walters before, but it was very different. It was a medieval historic piece. As I said, the first of a two-parter, so the structure was quite different than a one-book narrative. And so I wasn't too sure exactly what I was going to get into, especially when this was a more modern setting than a historical setting. And I was really thoroughly impressed. This is a highly complex book with many characters, many puzzle pieces. Some things that you think are puzzle pieces are not, and vice versa. And it does have some very disturbing elements to it. Mainly, I'm not going to say exactly why because I don't want to spoil, but I just want to give a trigger warning. There is a great deal of child abuse in this book. That's the key, a key element of the book itself is child abuse. And there's stuff to do with drugs and alcohol and such as well, but child abuse is the key thing around this story. The way in which Minette writes, I really, really respect her in that, especially, she never ever does a cop-out. But, well, obviously from the 2 books that I've read of hers, because I haven't read any of her others. I do have one of her other books on my to-read list for this year, but I can only judge out the 2 that I've read. She doesn't do a cop-out ending. She doesn't give her characters cop-out endings either. Is it, the overall narrative and the individual characters is what I'm talking about here. Everything is done for a purpose. There is no stuff that falls to the waistline. I just respect her as a writer for doing that, and I love the fact also that she has people have a negative ending because they deserve it. She's not doing it to torture a character, as it were, for the hell of it, which I know some writers do. She does it because it's important to the narrative. It's important to teach the lesson. There is such a thing as karma, especially in this book, and people get burned for it. It is what it is. So I totally and utterly respect her for that, especially. I loved the pace of it. It felt very realistic. And what I mean by that is that I feel like if it was written more, possibly more modern, as in if this book was written now rather than in 1995, I feel like possibly a publisher would want to, or an editor, should I say, to structure this book differently. I think quite possibly they would want it some parts overemphasized or something, when Minette doesn't work like that. Because the reason she's making you focus on this area so you don't see this little area over here, which is the key thing. And yeah, I have a feeling if you compare it to more modern crime writing today, that it would be quite different, but it works so bloody well. Her characters are so realistic, and really there's some dark characters in this. I do love the fact that she's also a bit light-hearted in the certain conversations that she has with the Cooper, how he speaks with his boss, basically, and the back and forth that they have is quite dark humor, but you kind of you get it because of the work that they're in, that you kind of need that dark humor to deal with some really horrific stuff, and there is some really horrific stuff in this book. So even though it was quite dark humor, I really appreciated having that there. And I love the fact also that all her characters, including our heroes like Cooper, like Sarah, like Jack, especially Jack, really have their issues. They are not necessarily nice people. They are incredibly flawed. And even like at the end of the book, I felt like Sarah, I'm not sure you made the right decision at the end of the book when it came to Jack. You know, I was a bit like, are you sure you want to do this, hun? I mean, I just have a feeling that after this book ended, they wouldn't have a happy ending, so to speak. Um, but as Minette kind of, as I know from the last hours and from other characters in this book, it is life. These things happen, people make mistakes, but as shown in the book for other characters, mistakes that they have made have led them to feel the wrath of karma. And maybe Sarah is willing to take take a leap of faith and see what happens, when at the beginning of the book she wouldn't have taken that leap. So maybe it was a good thing, the choice that Sarah made at the end of the book. Ultimately, I want Sarah to be happy. That's the main thing, and I have to respect her decision and such, for everything that she had been through in her relationship with Jack. You know, I respect, you know, as a person, as a character. I respect her as a. That's the key thing. So if she makes a mistake, she makes a mistake, but she has to make that mistake in order to know if it's the right thing. So yeah, but I did feel happy at the ending. I thought it was a really strong, powerful ending. So I'm not disappointed in any way, but it just makes it clear how Minette thinks, in that she doesn't want to give a cop-out ending. As I said, she doesn't want her characters to have all sunshine and rainbows at the end. Sometimes you have to make difficult choices, and you might stumble after you've made that choice, but it's making the choice that matters. And Sarah, as I said, wouldn't have made that choice at the beginning of the book. So I'm glad, even if it hurts her, that she made a choice at the end. So there we go. That was a bit long-winded, I know, but it's the way it is. Just as I said before, this has got some really dark stuff in here, guys. I love the way in which Minette writes it. She's not as all up in your face with it like Val McDermott was with The Mermaid Singing, but she lets you see enough of it to know exactly what is going on, what the implications will be, etc. And you always feel this, kind of like Laura Purcell, but not exactly to the same degree. This underlining darkness is creeping in. Laura Purcell takes that gothic writing to like level 10 in Bone China, but I'd say the underlying darkness tone for Minette Walters, or at least in this book, was probably about, compared to Laura, was probably about a 5, let's say. But she's not like up in your face in it, as I said, as Val McDermott is, which I really appreciated, because Val McDermott's The Mermaid Singing at times was like, whoa, I've got to take a step away here. So it got the balance perfect for me. It was very, very well constructed, well written, and that final page was just like, holy crap, because at the end of every chapter there is a diary entry of Matilda's, which, as you're reading it, you're learning more and more about who she was as a person. And then the final, once you've reached the end, because you know what she'd been through and everything, that final page, that final line was like, wow. So that is the exact moment in her life where she became the woman that she would become. That the destiny of her daughter, her granddaughter, changed in that second. And she was a child. She didn't know what was going to happen to her. But in that moment, everything changed. And now she's she got the ending that she did. And it's incredibly thought-provoking, incredibly sad, and it makes you, or at least it made me, think of the psychology and the effects of that Matilda had throughout her life. It's amazing. And now, thinking back over the diary entries as I went through them, I just, at times I just thought, oh God, she's such a bitch. She's horrible. And Sarah says, frankly, that is who she was. But now that I understand more, I'm like, oh God, you poor woman. I just want to hug you. I just want to hug you. And yeah, the suffering that she did through her time, it was very powerful read, and it's lingered with me. I finished this, 6 hours ago, and it's still sticking with me. She's still lingering there, and she's an absolute bitch, but God, she's a bitch that you won't forget anytime soon. Let me put it that way. So it's so compelling, it's so well structured, it's so eerie, it's so dark, it's so interesting. And what happened was so clever. So well done, Minette Walters. And thank you for bringing Shakespeare into it, because I love Shakespeare. So I'm just going to do a very quick reading. I'm actually going to read from the first chapter, because it gets the tone of exactly the crime scene and everything. And also all the other pages, just as I've had this before with crime novels, all the other pages that I marked as possibly doing a little reading for in my review, all were mega spoilers. So I was like, oh crap, can't do that. Because I didn't know at the time that they were spoilers. So there we go. So this is chapter 1, and it begins with Sarah basically confirming to the police that that Matilda is this woman in Matilda's bathtub, and explaining things about Matilda to the police. So Dr. Sarah Blakeney stood beside the bath and wondered how death could ever be described as a victory. There was no triumph here, no lingering sense that Matilda had abandoned her earthly shell for something better, no hint even that she had found peace. The dead, unlike the sleeping, offered no hope of a reawakening. You want my honest opinion? She said slowly in answer to the policeman's questions. Then no. Matilda Gillespie is the last person I'd have expected to kill herself. They stared at the grotesque figure, stiff and cold in the brackish water. Nettles and daisies spouted from the awful contraction that caged the bloodless face, its rusted metal bit clamping the dead tongue still in its gaping mouth. A scattering of petals, curling and decaying, clung to the scuggy shoulders and the side of the bath, while a brown sludge below the water's surface suggested more petals, waterlogged and sunk. On the floor lay a bloody Stanley knife, apparently dropped by the nerveless fingers that dangled above it. It was reminiscent of Amari and his bath, but so much uglier and so much sadder. Poor Matilda, thought Sarah. How she would have hated this. The police sergeant gestured at the pitiful grey head. What in God's name is that thing? His voice grated with repugnance. Sarah waited a moment until she felt her own voice was under control. It's a Scold's Bridle, she told him, a primitive instrument of repression. They were used in the Middle Ages to curb the tongues of nagging women. It's been in Matilda's family for years. I know it looks awful like that, but she kept it downstairs in the hall over her potted geraniums. As a decoration, it was rather effective. She raised her hand to her mouth in distress, and the policeman patted her shoulder awkwardly. They were white geraniums, and they poked their heads through the iron framework. Her coronet weeds, she always called them. She cleared her throat. She was rather fine, you know, very proud, very snobbish, very intolerant, and not overly friendly, but she had a brilliant mind for someone who had never been trained to do anything more than keep house, and she had a wonderful sense of humour, dry and incisive. Coronet weeds, echoed the pathologist thoughtfully. As in, there was a fantastic garland did she come of crowflowers, nettles, daisies, and long purples, that liberal shepherds give a grosser name, but our cold maids do dead man's fingers call them. There on the pendant burrows her coronet weeds. Hamlet, he explained apologetically to the policeman. Ophelia's End. I had to learn it for O-level. Amazing what you remember when you get older. He stared at the bath. Did Mrs. Gillespie know Hamlet? Sarah nodded happily. Oh, she told me once that her entire education was based on learning chunks of Shakespeare by heart. Well, we're not going to learn much by standing staring at the old woman, said the policeman abruptly, unless Ophelia was murdered. Dr. Cameron shook his head. Death by drowning, he said thoughtfully, while of unsound mind. He glanced at Sarah. Was Mrs. Gillespie depressed at all? Well, if she was, she never gave any indication of it. The policeman, decidedly more uncomfortable in the presence of death than either of the two doctors, ushered Sarah onto the landing. Many thanks for your time, Dr. Blakeney. I'm sorry that we had to subject you to that, but as her GP, you probably knew her better than most. It was her turn to sigh. They're always the worst, old people living alone, society's rejects. Sometimes it's weeks before they're even found. His mouth turned down into a curve of distaste. Very unpleasant. I suppose we're lucky that she was found so quickly. Less than 40 hours, according to Dr. Cameron. Midnight Saturday, he estimates. Sarah leant her back against the wall and stared across the landing towards Mathilda's bedroom, where the open door showed the old oak bed piled high with pillows. There was a strange sense of ownership still, as if her possessions retained the presence that her flesh had lost. She wasn't that old, she protested mildly. 65, no more. These days, that's nothing. She looks older, he said matter-of-factly. But then she would, I suppose, with all of her blood drained out of her. So, yes, you can see there's kind of an understanding of, police procedure and everything, where you've got this very dark thing that's going on, and then this kind of, in a sense, a light-heartedness to that. So there's something very human about it. I don't know what, but it has that underlining darkness to it, which creeps up and up and up as the book goes along, which I really like of Minette's writing. It's so well constructed, a really complex story told very succinctly, and such a brilliant array of characters. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this. I would like to delve more into certain aspects, but I can't without giving away key things about it, giving away lots of spoilers, so I'm going to stop there. So there is a drama of this, which came out in 1998. As I said, the book was published in 1995. That is available on YouTube, which I will link in the description below if you want to check it out. I've watched it. I actually managed to watch the adaptation, guys. Usually, I used to be really good with that, and then I kind of fell to the waistline because I was like, all right, I've got to stop. I've got to get this review done and such and move on. But I managed to watch it. It is very good. Well, not very good, but it is good in that it basically follows pretty much a verbatim whole scenes from the book. There are a couple of things which is reordered in order to make it so that the truth doesn't get revealed until the very last moment. So in regards to what I mean by that is that there is this whole thing of them finding out a truth, and then they have to find a motive little later on in the book, whereas they've stuck the motive first and then the truth is revealed. So, so there is, slight reordering, but it still completely works. The one thing though that did irk me, that brings it down, is that even though it tells the story and it does, follow everything, the really dark stuff, which is so important to Matilda, her background and everything, it's kind of not brushed aside, but not really acknowledged. It's like it's a Sunday evening Poirot Marple kind of thing. It is a good drama, but it just doesn't go down to that darkness level until you get to the final scene where you're actually witnessing some of what Matilda went through, some of the lighter side, if I'm honest, of what Matilda went through, and that's in the final scene. And the voiceover is the final page of the book, which I really liked. But it just didn't go dark enough, and there are some elements of characters where they have got some really dark things happening to them, or they are dark in their own personalities, but the drama doesn't get that deep. So one of those key characters is Jack. He has got some stuff going on, and basically until a scene happens which is quite dark with him, about halfway through the second episode, should I say? Yeah, but the halfway point of that second episode, that is the first time that we see the darkness, and it comes completely out of the blue. Whereas in the book, because you have some of this darkness to his character, it slowly builds up until he kind of explodes, and then you get that moment. So for the drama, it feels completely off character, and a bit out of the blue, but other than that, he's not too bad. So it has its faults, it has its issues, but for a succinct book transfer adaptation of this crime novel and the way that it told the story, it was well adapted. So I'd say if you want to watch the drama, give it a go, but it is in no way as dark as what the book is. And because of that, I think it truly lacks the understanding of who Matilda was and how she came to be who she was. It's more about the crime detecting than understanding Matilda. So because of that, it's probably about a 3.5 to 4 out of 5. But I'd watch it again. So, if you want to watch it, see what you think. I've got the links in the description down below. So that's it. So those are my thoughts on The Scrolls Bridle by Minette Walters. So would I read this again? Yes, for certain. I really enjoyed this. It was a very interesting story to delve into, and I'd really like to go back and meet the characters again. And I don't know, maybe give it a while and then revisit and see how I feel about the characters, because obviously I've got very fresh things in my mind, thoughts about them, but maybe going back and rereading, knowing what I know now, I would see them in a slightly different light and have maybe a different judgment on them. Would I read any more of Minette Walters' books? Yes, certainly. As I said, I read The Last Hours last year, and I've also got the Icebox to read this year of Minette Walters, which I'm looking forward to reading. Would I recommend this to anyone? Yes, I certainly would. I would give a heads up that there is some possible trigger stuff in here to do with child abuse, but it is extremely well written. I would certainly recommend it to somebody who was looking for a really good crime novel to read. Okay, so there we are. So, have you read this book? I'd love to know what you think. Leave me a comment in the comments box below, or give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Entirely up to you, I'll let you decide. And I'll be back with my thoughts on my next read, which I've already announced, which is Queenie by Candice Cathy Williams. So this is the last book that I have announced so far that I am reading, and I think I've already figured out 3 of my next 5 reads, but you'll find out what those next 5 are when I put out the review for Queenie. All right then, guys, I'll see you later. Bye.